dashboard within the Army. Like I said, Type A, aviator type, I'm all about accountability. And so I want to make sure that one of the first things we clearly understood was, who do we hold by the short hairs for the network's overall health status. And so from a DoD perspective, you're looking at the Army in terms of the Secretary of the Army, the Army Chief Staff, and the Army Chief Information Officer. And so I figured if you put their pictures on there, you're definitely going to get their attention. They're going to say, man, I look good. They immediately want to look over at that grade score. And when we're in college, you know how they used to post in the hallways your test results, and they have like the last 4 of your social security number and letter grade. And you look there and you look around and find your grade, and then you see somebody else's grade. Oh wow, I wasn't as bad as this person over here. So you immediately want to compare yourself to somebody else, right? Well, within this capability, you have the means to compare how well you're defending your piece of the gig to how well somebody else is comparing those. And so nothing like a little competition out there to help increase the overall security posture of the network. If I'm the network enterprise center out there, say at Fort Huachuca, and I know every system on my network like the back of my hand, and I'm very, I take it personal about any particular vulnerabilities that may be on my network. So I'm going to look at my score, and I see how they're doing maybe at Fort Campbell or some of these other places. And I'm going to say, wait, I'm not letting those crap bastards at Campbell get a better score than me, so I'm going to go up there. And if I can't get that, I'm going to call them up and say, hey, what are you guys doing? How did you get that A? How did you use this? And then we start sharing the information. Of course, then we can start talking between the Army and the Air Force, and then put your bets on that or whatever we want to do. But at the end of the day, it's about risk management and trying to increase the overall response. What better way to put the pictures up there, let them know who they are, what they're responsible for, and then give them a nice, easy grading system. Everybody knows what an A+ is. Everybody knows what an F- is. And then the listing of units down the left side of the screen here, those are the 28 commands within the Army. So in order to have the data that's useful, we need to have it actionable. And so within the Army, there's 28 commands, and these are the 2, 3, 4-star general officers that make the Army go on. And so one of the other abilities of this dashboard is to be able to go from the highest level and make it actionable and useful for other leaders in the food chain. Next slide. So I'm going to pick on General Hernandez. He is the lucky winner of the new command called the Army Cyber Command, 2nd Army. So he's got the daunting task to make sure that the direction and operation and defense of all Army networks are ship-shape. And so if I'm General Hernandez, I'm going to say, okay, so while he's one of the 28, today in the Army, we don't have a truly, fully enterprise network. So he's not in charge of all the networks in the Army today. But he's being held accountable for it. So he needs to know what he is in fact responsible for, but then he needs to know that, well, if the Army Guard or the Army medical community is running and operating their own networks, he also needs to be have situational awareness of what they're up to. But first things first, he's going to say, well, if it's something under my direct control, well, by God, I need to make sure I can set the standards and show everybody how to operate these networks and minimize risk very effectively. So he's got the picture and the snapshots of the NIPRNet, the SIPRNet type networks. Again, this the iPost, I plug that in there. And I also give him, the other thing I love about the military is the food chain. You know where you stand in the food chain. Everybody's got a boss, and you look at everybody's shoulders and figure out, if you call them sir, ma'am, or, hey, you come here. But we also give another view to General Hernandez. Next slide. This is one I actually prefer right here, because I'm a numbers guy, and the top part of this chart right here, this horizontal histogram, it tells you where your problem kids are at. So it tells the leader where their top risks are at in terms of those 10 categories that I shared with you before. And we're talking about possibly using the consistent audit guide. There's 20 areas in the CAG, and we're looking at how we'll be able to leverage some of those categories. But whatever we come with at the end of the day, we can then quantify where the problem areas are at, how much risk and how much exposure there is. Say, if you haven't migrated to Vista yet, it's going to cost you $500K to get there, but then you can go back and say, well, we can reduce our risk by 33% if we just do that one activity. And so then it begins more actionable data for the leaders to understand. Say, okay, is it worth 500K? I can reduce 23 or 33% of my risks, and they can make a better informed decision on that. But the bottom piece of this is actually what I call the risk over time chart. And it's kind of like the stock market out there. Your risk never stays static, right? So anybody here keep tabs on the stock market? Is it up or down today? Nobody keeps tabs on the stock market? There you go, sunny area. That's just right. We'll be back there. Here we go. But at any given day, every day there's new risks that are coming out in the wild. And so we have to constantly monitor where we're at, plus what new vulnerabilities do we have, and where we've been. And so one of the other things is, by adopting a continuous monitoring scoring capability, is I want to move us into a continuous monitoring certification and accreditation. And that's where I think we're going to start seeing a lot of return on our investments, as far as instead of having to accredit individually 1,675 systems in the Army, I can say, well, we will accredit the CONUS-wide area network, we will accredit the European-wide area network, and the Pacific area network, and SWAS, and all the piece parts that are on those will be part of that accreditation package. So now I'm talking 4 or 5. But then I'm going to go out and I'm going to say, for your POAM, your project of objectives and milestones, as long as your risk does not exceed maybe 10,000 risk points, I'm going to leave it on. That's telling me you're doing your job and you're kind of flying straight level. I know that there's going to be fluctuations in the market, right? But for the most part, I'm going to say you're doing your job and we're not going to have to. It's when that risk factor starts climbing, maybe even exponentially climbing, and I'm going to come up and knock on your door and say, hey, how can I help you? I see you up here, it looks like your tachometer on your engine, right? You're getting ready to blow a head gasket on that, and we're trying to prevent that. And while you like driving fast, you guys got to repair the car when you break it, right? So we need to have that checks and balances out there and say, as long as you're operating within a certain acceptable standards, then we're going to allow you to continue to fly your airplane. And once we start seeing indications that there's going to be a burning hole in the ground because of the failure of some part, that's where we need to step in and say, what is it that we can do to help manage mitigation of risk. That's the charts that are there. It gives you a history over time, how well you're doing, from improving, and then how well that our technologies that we're putting in place are actually impacting our overall risk profile. Excellent. Then we get down to where the rubber hits the road. This is what I call my John Doe. He's the director of the Network Enterprise Center at Camp Swampy. And so we want to make sure that this capability is not only useful for the 2, 3, 4-star general officers out there, but as well as for the system administrator who, I said, when he wakes up every morning, he's already got 1,000 tasks, and he's already behind the 8 ball. And so he has the same views as a senior leader does. So he knows what his grade is, he knows what his overall risk score is. He also has the history charts and everything else. But I also want to make sure he has the ability to do something else. Next slide. He can drill down on each one of the risk areas down into individual host machines. So this would be computer A, or this might be Jones' computer. He's got 100,000 risk points on there. So he can come to my ass out for why I've had to plug my laptop into the network in the last 30 days because I'm in TDY and haven't gotten all my updates, right? So he's the guy that's can get right down into the individual machine levels to see what needs to happen. And also the way the Department of State's actually implemented their iPost, they have a cool little hyperlink over there. So whatever problem is on that specific box, they've got a hyperlink on how to go back and fix